So welcome here.
Hello, good morning, good day. Welcome to today's press conference with the Swedish Minister of Finance, Elisabeth Svantesson, and the Executive Vice President, Valdis Dombrovskis. This press conference will be held in English. Translation is available in Swedish and in French. When you ask a question, please state your media outlet and your name. Thank you.
So then, let me also welcome you all here, and it has been a pleasure to have my colleagues here in Stockholm for these days. It's a very special time in many ways, and this has been a very good 2 days. I will try to conclude what we have done. We have, of course, discussed the economic difficult situation and with high inflation and slower growth, of course. But we have also talked about how our economies can be stronger and more solid and stable in the future. We started our meeting with a working lunch yesterday where we discussed how to address the immediate challenges caused by high inflation, and we also shared a lot of experiences, minister to minister, and it was clear from our discussion that households and companies all over EU are struggling right now with both high inflation and rising interest rates. And this is, of course, especially difficult for households with small margins, and the urgent short-term challenges is to protect these groups through very targeted fiscal measures in a way that does not raise inflation. At lunch, the Commission also mentioned their proposal on a reform of the economic governance framework that was published just earlier this week. I welcome the publication, of course, and look forward to future discussions. But I will say we didn't have any discussion of this proposal at these 2 days. But the Swedish presidency will, of course, take this proposal forward with highest priority. And we plan actually to start the legal work in the working group straight away in the coming week. And we will drive the process forward as much as we can before handing it over to the Spanish presidency and Nadia. Then we moved to our first working session that were joined by the central bank governors, who was also here, as you know. And we discussed the capital markets' role in financing young and innovative companies, and given the right conditions and good access to capital, these companies will provide growth and new jobs in EU as well as a solution to the green and digital transition. This is the key for our future economy, we all agree to. We recognize that EU could do better compared to others like UK and US. And further reforms are needed both to develop national capital markets, but also, of course, to make the capital market union stronger. And that has been an issue for these days too. And on that related note, I just will mention that I, together with incoming Council presidencies, the Commission and the European Parliament issued a joint statement yesterday, and it confirms our determination to continue our work when it comes to deliver on the capital market union. In our second working session, we discussed how to best manage public finance over the medium to long term, and we shared ideas on how to ensure sustainable public finance while still having enough space to support growth and investments. And close cooperation on fiscal policy is crucial, of course, and in this context, continuing the work on a reform of the economic governance framework will, of course, be a high priority. Lastly, I will soon turn over to Valdis. We also just now finished a very, very good discussion on Ukraine. I am very honored that when I asked both the Minister of Finance for Ukraine, Sergei Marchenko, and I also asked Canada's Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, to come here, I was very pleased that they both came. And we had a discussion about support now, but also when it comes to reconstruction. And we see that cooperation and coordination will be essential in our continued support to Ukraine. And we all gave our strongest support, of course, in the continued fight for peace and crucial reconstructions of the country. And I'll give the floor to you, Valdis.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for your hospitality and warm welcome we are receiving here. It's a pleasure to be here in Stockholm. And thank you for enabling such rich discussions during this informal ECOFIN meeting. We have taken stock of European economy and also looked ahead beyond immediate challenges. On the face of it, the EU economy is coping remarkably well with a series of shocks. Labour markets are strong, headline inflation is cooling down, but by historical standards it is still high, with core inflation on the rise. At this environment, it's important to ensure a prudent fiscal policy. This is not time for broad-based fiscal stimulus. EU countries now need to phase out energy support measures, especially those that are not targeted. The key to our economy's ability to cope with future shocks is to rebuild fiscal buffers and to implement necessary reforms and investments. The EU faces massive reform and investment needs for the green and digital transitions, to strengthen our social and economic resilience and to secure long-term energy supplies, and more broadly, we need to strengthen our competitiveness. It is in this context that we presented proposals on economic governance review on Wednesday. We struck a careful balance. Our proposals aim to achieve steady reduction of public debt, simpler rules to ensure debt sustainability through gradual and realistic fiscal adjustment, while supporting sustainable and inclusive growth. EU countries will have greater flexibility and ownership for their medium-term fiscal objectives. At the same time, safeguards will be used to ensure transparency and equal treatment, with stronger enforcement so that countries implement their commitments. On this, we look forward to work with Swedish presidency and later with Spanish presidency to advance this legislative process. As you know, the last month's ECOFIN set a very ambitious timeline to this to finalize legislative work still this year. But we are all aware, in terms of generating and attracting investment, the public purse can do only so much. We need more private investment, and for that we need a fully functioning capital markets union. A number of CMU proposals made by the Commission are still outstanding. These measures can make a real difference, and we have no time to lose. Our companies are losing out in terms of not having greater access to efficient and cost-effective funding, and we are looking more broadly on how to create best possible conditions for innovative businesses to grow and thrive. This requires not just developed capital markets, but also a business-friendly environment and labor force with right skills. Allow me now to turn to Ukraine's reconstruction and for fast recovery this year. As you know, concerning the current financing needs for Ukraine, the financing gap for this year is covered, also thanks to the EU's macro-financial assistance plus program of 18 billion euros. For a fast recovery, the World Bank has estimated a cost of just over $14 billion. The EU is already mobilizing 1 billion euros for the fast recovery, and today EU and member states reaffirmed their full commitment to support Ukraine's reconstruction. It was very valuable to have the insights of Ukrainian Finance Minister Marchenko and those of Canada's Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland. We need to work closely both with Ukraine and our international partners to have maximum impact. This is why we have set up a reconstruction platform where the EU is playing an important role together with the United States and, of course, in close cooperation with Ukraine. In parallel, we are taking steps to help Ukraine to integrate more in a single market and to press ahead with its reform agenda in line with the EU accession process. Ukraine also needs a great deal of private investment. So it's important to raise the country's attractiveness as an investment destination. We will be working on ways to enable EU companies to support Ukraine's reconstruction effort with export credits and investment insurance. Staying with Ukraine, allow me to say some final words on yesterday's breakthrough political agreement on Ukraine's agri-food products. We reached agreement in principle with 5 neighboring member states, Bulgaria, Hungary, Poland, Romania and Slovakia, as well as with Ukraine itself. The European Commission will propose emergency safeguard measures for the 4 most sensitive products, wheat, maize, rapeseed and sunflower seed. And we will launch so-called safeguard investigations on several other products as well. We also propose a €100 million support package for affected farmers in those neighboring countries. In return, they will withdraw their unilateral measures. So we have found a solution that addresses both concerns of the farmers in neighboring countries and also of Ukraine. So I'm relieved and grateful that we were able to resolve this issue. Thank you.
Yes, in the back, please.
Sam Fleming from the Financial Times. Just a question on economic governance. There's clearly a very strong divide between the position of Germany in particular on the need for mandatory annual debt ratio reductions and the position of many other member states who are closer to the more flexible regime proposed by the European Commission. Given the strength of that divide, do you see it as plausible still that there could be a deal before the end of the year on the new legislation? Thank you.
I mean, thank you for the question. I mean, we did come together, all 27 of us, with a paper to the Commission, and now the Commission has come back with the proposal. Just a couple of days that came, but I definitely think it's possible to agree, and then in what speed this will be, we will come back to. But it's important to underline that we did agree, all 27 of us, in the former phase. So I'm positive. But exactly what date or what month it will be, we will do our best to proceed. And as I said, we'll start this just this week, our negotiations.
Yeah, from the Commission side, we think we put forward a balanced proposal. Indeed, in last week's preparation of our legislative proposal, we were looking exactly in those elements of numerical benchmark and a couple of other elements which ECOFIN asked us to do. And we have reinforced those numerical benchmarks, for example, for countries whose budget deficit exceeds 3% of GDP. There's going to be a minimum fiscal adjustment of 0.5% of GDP per year. We have requirements that debt to GDP ratio at the end of the implementation of member states' fiscal structural plans needs to be lower than at the beginning. There are going to be also technical trajectories prepared by European Commission to be used as reference points for the member states' fiscal structural plans. So I'd say there are elements to ensure transparency and equal treatment of member states. And of course, from the Commission side, we stand ready to facilitate the legislative process.
Jorge Valero with Bloomberg. A question on the discussion on Ukraine and Ukraine reconstruction. Apart from the importance of coordination and cooperation, which is of course not the first time that we heard that, could you give us more details about the details of this discussion, having 27 ministers there? In particular, even though we cannot know at this point what will be the figure of the reconstruction, at least is there a bit of clarity on how you're going to pay for it? How you're going to finance this? The obvious reason would be that the EU will need to issue joint debt again. So I don't know if there's a common agreement at least on this point. Thank you.
I will say though that in the room today, when we have the Minister of Finance in the room, and also Christian Freeland, Canada is also a very big partner and part in this. There is a very strong unity among countries to support and stand by Ukraine. And I'm convinced that that will continue. And we will, of course, come back, but if I just say something about today's discussion, we discussed quite a lot also, and many interventions on the frozen assets, and the discussion of that, and I think that will be a quite big issue for the future. It's already are, of course, but when it comes to Russian state frozen assets, and I think that question might be even more urging the next month.
Indeed, just to complement what the Minister just said, we all know that Ukraine reconstruction needs to require major financial mobilization of the EU, of other international donors, of international financial institutions. That's why we had set up this Ukraine reconstruction platform, bringing in all the potential donors and discussing in which way we better achieve the reconstruction, both in terms of raising the funding and in terms of how this money is spent. So this work is ongoing. There's also going to be next Ukraine reconstruction conference in June in London, where we'll be advancing this work further.
We have a question here in the front.
Yes, good afternoon, Mark Beberkorn from Netherlands. Question for the Minister on economic governance again. The proposal has actually 3 parts. 2 parts are can be dealt with by QMV, and 1 part needs unanimity. Do you think that it's a good idea to actually use the QMV for the 2 parts where it's possible? So simply to overrule 1 or 2 member states which would block everything. Thanks.
I think we all, 27 member states, want to agree on this important framework. And we all agree that it's important to have some revision of the old, and now we agreed also to have a new and updated, or what's the right word for it. But I think it's important that we all stand behind it. That would make it, if some countries doesn't really have its faith in and believe in the framework, that wouldn't be good. So as much unity as possible is, of course, needed. But I'm more positive than maybe some others, and I won't go in details. Neither when it comes to countries or in details of the proposal, because it just came, and I'm the presidency, chair of the presidency now, and the ECOFIN now, so I won't go into details, but I'm convinced, as I said before, and since we agreed on the conclusion, I also think that we could agree in next step. Will it be easy? No. Will it be possible? Yes.
Do we have any more questions? Yes, in the back. Thank you.
Åsa Stilman, Swedish TV4. Could you elaborate a little bit more about this Canadian proposal we heard about, that using frozen Russian assets to rebuild Ukraine? And maybe if it's possible for the Minister to take a little bit in Swedish too, if that's okay.
We can start in English, and maybe then... would you like to start?
Indeed, as regards use of confiscated Russian assets, this work is ongoing, so we are doing the legal assessment of feasibility and modalities of that approach. Also, as a part of 10th sanctions package, European Commission put forward a proposal of reporting obligation of member states on the type and amount of assets which EU member states are having in their respective territories, so that we can have overview on how much Russian assets we're actually talking. And given the massive funding need, indeed, that's something we need to assess and look at the ways how also those Russian assets can be used for Ukraine reconstruction, because it's also under the international law obligation for the aggressor state to pay for damages it has created.
Yeah. When it comes to the Canadian, maybe it's not totally comparable, but the Canadian minister is very engaged, and the Canadian government is very engaged. I come back in Swedish soon. And that was good to hear, and how they've been working with this issue. Of course, it's not easy. I mean, there is a lot of legal questions, but it's also a question of moral. And as the minister from Canada said, I mean, many of our countries now put in a lot of money to support Ukraine, and we will continue as long as it takes. But when we all know that there also are Russian frozen assets out there, is I think it's also when it comes to our own countries, good to show that Russia has to pay for this, what they have done during this war. Så, kort på svenska.
So, briefly, in Swedish, the Canadian Finance Minister explained to us how they work in Canada on this front. They're very committed, and they go a step further regarding the frozen assets. And we are investing a lot of our respective national resources into Ukraine to support the reconstruction of Ukraine. And this is very important vis-à-vis the population. We need to show that ultimately it's up to Russia to pay for the damage done. So in terms of managing the assets, it's good that this is such a high priority for the Swedish presidency. There's a specific group which is focusing on this. How can we manage and then use the frozen assets? So we have a specific group for that.
We have time for one more question. Here in the front.
Johan Andersson, Swedish Radio. Yes, but still, what's the main result of the discussion today for Ukraine, Commissioner? What would you say about it? What's the biggest news today for you? There is discussion on Ukraine.
As regards our discussions on Ukraine, it's a constant and ongoing work. So we had our discussions on how we cover the financing need for this year. As I said, for current financing need is covered. We had discussions on fast recovery and what can be mobilized, including European Commission called on member states to consider further contributions to this fast recovery part, where there is still some funding gaps. We discussed the way forward on reconstruction. It was important also that ministers firsthand hear the views of Ukraine's finance minister Marchenko, that we have this dialogue, that we listen to other international partners like from Canada. So I think that was a valuable discussion, which was informing our thinking as we develop and work on our way forward. Even though you didn't ask me, I will answer yes to say, I think this is probably was the first time a minister from Ukraine was in ECOFIN. And we had his sign written in Ukraine, not only in English, but their own language. And hearing him get very real, very practical of what the needs are, what is going well in Ukraine, what is the problems, and hearing his story. And last night he also told us at the dinner about the generations before him and now his kids. Having him both getting very practical and describing the situation, I think that affects us quite a lot, of course. But also good to hear his numbers. He's very specific. He's very specific what they need, and that was good.
Thank you so much. Then we conclude the press conference.